the struggle because we know that it's through that struggle that we grow. Also, I like to say it is a slow process for progress and that the race is never to those that are swift, it's to those that remain dutiful. So you got to stay in this for the long haul. You know, I don't offer any legal advice. I'm not a legal counsel or an attorney. Just your brother. Just share with you education and information about my walk, about my travels, throughout my journey called life. I like to extend these honors to you. When you're honoring man and woman, you most definitely are honoring yourself. Let's give adoration to the Most High, here in the temple of my life. Extend that same love, courtesy, and acknowledgement to all of his messages and prophets. Peace to you, beloved brothers and sisters, and grand rising to all of God's chosen ones. And the reason why I say God's chosen ones is because if you experience in life you are chosen, you wouldn't be here. Believe that. You would not be here having this experience and if you was not chosen by God, the creator. I say God, but let me say creator. See, you got to remember, one thing that we do have to remember is that we are divine beings. And before we descended down from heaven to earth, right, we had to be chosen by the creator in order to be entrusted with this mission. Now, what's the mission? The mission is you are in trust and you have been selected to act as agent, right, through the guise of a person. Now, the person is the flesh. The flesh is the person, right, that you were assigned to. When you were selected by the creator, he selected a person for you to actually act through. Now, the person is considered as property, right? And when you're using your person, you're acting as agent, right? When your person acts as the agent is the vessel that you do all of your business through. All of your interactions go through your person. You eat through your person. You bathe through your person. You communicate through your person. You take visuals through your person. Okay? Your person is your property. And you are the principal. The principal is the mind and the soul of the person who controls the person, who makes the person get up and walk, who makes the person speaks, who makes the person run down the street, who makes the person play the video game. It's called the principle. The principle is the controlling force within the person, and he has supreme authority over the person and is recognized as the living child with supreme authority. So it's a lot of things that they've hidden. See, in order for you not to know God, they had to hide the truth. See, God is knowledge, knowingness, all knowing, all wise. So information, knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, it's like a collective consciousness of knowingness, right? It's to know. It's to be aware. See, when you're not aware, when you don't know, then it's easily to be deceived. It's easily to be manipulated, easily to be controlled in a state of unawareness. You have first person, second person, and you have third person. It's always been three persons. We know this. We've been knowing this since we were children. We just never thought about it to be reality, that is actually real. You see what I'm saying? So you're in what's called a true trust. True trust, right? And whenever you're acting through your agent, you have to have authority to do the acts. Every person that's born and assigned has to go through certain transformations in order to have the authority to do certain things within a formal government. So when man declared government and created government, it was something bestowed upon all living things that we had to follow certain customs under bonds and agreements, covenants that were created amongst men. Okay? When these covenants were created, these covenants bound every man to keep these covenants. It's just that certain people were not disclosed, given full disclosure of certain facts and information, which makes it easier for people who have more information to do things or to manipulate to the best of their interests. All right. It's illegal to use a person without actually the man in use or woman using the person identifying themselves. What I mean is illegal for you to utilize your legal character that you're using without identifying who you truly are. It's a violation. And when you're operating through your person, it's a requirement that the person has to be licensed. A man doesn't have to be licensed, but a person does. You see what I'm saying? And it's illegal for a man to be bound as a person, for the living to be bound as the dead. So it's a lot of things that have been kept hidden from us, but I'm gonna go over some things today. I'm gonna share some thoughts with you, and I just want you to listen, because when you listen to what I'm gonna say to you, it's gonna make so much sense. Can you cut that down just a little bit for me?
Okay.
Appreciate it. I ain't gonna be long today, y'all, because I got a couple of things I gotta get in the mail, but I do want to cover some pertinent information for you guys, man, and it's very powerful information. Just check it out. Check it out. Let me find it. Let me pull it up. All right. All right, so I'm gonna go up some because I've been reading. I started reading this, and I've been really studying it, because certain stuff, it ain't meant to be read, it's meant to be studied. And we have to actually start, really digging into a lot of this information, right? All right, now look, I'm finna read something. Now, it says that a juridic person is a type of artificial creature by a lawful act and association of two or more level 6 higher order life forms in accordance with these canons, right? So you got what they call 7 forms of juridic persons, and then you got what's called divine personalities, and all persons temporarily based on temporary trust, right? So like the temporary trust is like life. It's not something that this flesh is temporary. It's not eternal. So it's like it's a temporary trust agreement that you're entrusted to do specific things, right? But I'm gonna pull some up as soon as I can find it. Let me find it real quick. There's so much fire up here. I just gotta, sometimes you just gotta slow down, and you gotta really digest information, because some of this information that I be finding, it be so Hold up. All right, so check this out. It says a true person is the second highest. No, no, matter of fact, let me go to the first one. Let me go to the first one. A divine person. A divine person is the purely divine spirit person associated with divine trust formed in accordance to a sacred covenant. It says, by the divine creator into which the form of divine spirit, energy, and rights are conveyed. A divine person possesses the greatest and highest power and authority of all possible types of persons, right? A divine person is derived from a divine trust. A divine trust is formed when a divine immortal spirit being part of a divine agrees with the intents of the collective divine, known as the unique collective awareness, to be recognized as a unique member of the divine in accordance with the sacred covenant, right? Now it says, into the divine trust, and then placed in one unit of a pure awareness representing one unique divine immortal spirit and mind, one unit of awareness representing the unique experience of a form in motion, energy, or creation, and connected to form, and one unit representing all unique awareness of experience of unique form and motion as a divine form. All right, now listen to these words. Now let's keep going, right? Now that's powerful. That's powerful because it's talking about the uniqueness of awareness, because that's what we've become over a duration of time. We become unique in our awareness to different things about what we call life. All right. So let's keep going. It says, in accordance with these, with the most sacred covenant and the consent of all members, original first ecclesiastical, lawful, and legal title is granted in perpetuity to the divine temple known as the treasury of one heaven in the unique collective awareness of divine mind, also known as Divina, as spiritual trustees for the proper protection, safety, well-being, management, and employment of all affairs and all needs of the divine person, right? As existence of a universe depends upon the consent of each and every divine immortal spirit and their associated divine person. The proof of continuous existence of universe is evidenced by completing and willing consent of all divine spirit persons as members of one heaven. And the divine person is therefore the first person, the highest person, the perfected person, from which all other lesser persons derive their consent and authority. Okay, so they said that the divine person is the highest person, and all other persons derive authority from the divine. Right now, we come down to what's called a true person. A true person is the second highest possible form of person associated with true trust. So a true person is associated with what is known as a true trust, formed when an associated divine trust already exists, and there is a lawful conveyance of divine rights of use and purpose known as divinity to the true trust, associated with then the birth and existence of a living level 6 higher order life form, right? So the second highest self is the true self, right? Then it says a true person of a true trust form when the executors and administrators of an associated divine trust agrees to give, grant, convey, divine rights of use, also known as divinity, into a true trust. A true person can only be formed when an associated divine trust is already in existence, right? So basically, I'm gonna keep going because I don't want to get off. A true person is owned by the true trust. In turns, is administered by the executor of the true trust. The mind and the brain and the trustee being the flesh, in accordance with the sacred covenant, right? Now, let me read that again. Now, it says a true person is owned by a true trust. So a true person is owned by what's known as a true trust, which in turn is administered by an executor. So the trust is administered by the executor of the trust, being the mind and brain. So the executor of the trust is the mind and the brain, right? And trustee. And it's acting as trustee, being the flesh. So the mind and the brain is the executor, and the trustee is the flesh. Basically what it's saying. So your mind and the brain acts as executor, and your flesh is the trustee, right? In accordance with a sacred covenant. It says, no other lesser trust, lesser inferior person can claim ownership, liens, seizures, enforcements, or other unlawful acts against the true person. When a valid registration number from a great register is redeemed as recognized of an existence of a divine person, the associated divine immortal spirit consents and agrees in true trust to ensure that the society of one heaven administer the rights and obligations of the member as a trustee. So it's talking about a true person, right, which is flesh and blood, right, is formed when an executor or an administrator, right, of the trust being the mind and the brain, and the trustee being the flesh. Now we're going to keep going because it breaks it all the way down. Now, proof of existence of a true person and a true trust through the issue of a valid live born record as a divine immortal being expressed into a flesh vessel. Now I'm gonna read it again. It says, proof of the existence of a true person and a true trust is through the issue of a valid live born record as a divine immortal spiritual being expressed into a flesh vessel. So any kind of record that shows a living being, right, or a divine being born in a vessel, in a living flesh vessel, is considered as a divine immortal spiritual record, right? Then it says any live born record with an inferior Roman system which issues a unique number for a flesh of a baby also be taken as proof of existence of a true trust, and the inferiority of any inferior Roman person as proof of existence of flesh is proof of existence of divine immortal spirit. Hold up, let me read that again. It says any live birth record with an inferior Roman system, like any state government, District of Columbia, any Roman system. So any live birth record within any inferior Roman system, which issues a unique number for the flesh of a baby, may also be taken as proof of existence of a true trust, and the inferiority of any inferior Roman person as proof of the existence of flesh is proof of the existence of divine immortal spirit. Okay? So that live birth record is very, very, very powerful record. Okay? Whether you know it or not. All right? And the reason why we are in a Roman system, I've already showed you guys that when you go to your state statutes and codes and you look up and you tap on in the beginning and look at the laws, it tell you in the beginning that they operating under Old English laws under King James III. That's the first thing that it says, where all the stuff, the codes, the statutes, all the stuff that, so we under Roman rule, we under Roman law, under the Catholic, the Vatican, all that stuff that you're hearing is true. It ain't false. It's true. Okay. And what I'm doing is I'm reading to you, in the laws, in the canons, what it's saying. Okay. So you can see what it's saying. Let's keep going though. Let's keep going. All right. A superior person is the highest possible form of person associated with superior trust. When an associated true trust already exists and there is a lawful conveyance of first rights of use and possibly known as reality, the superior trust associated with birth of service or agreement associated with a membership of a living level 6 higher order life form to a valid Eutychian society. So a superior person would be like somebody that's dealing dealing with the services under agreement, where they become bound by their position under an agreement. And then it says an office is the normal term given to the most sacred position of status and title, given life and legal personality of its own, to which certain special powers are then bestowed, right? So when you hold office, you are bestowed special powers. Like a judge, he has special powers to do things he wouldn't be able to do if he wasn't a judge. A bailiff, same thing with a sheriff, or any other person who holds a particular office, in which that office grants that person special powers, right? Only 6 forms of superior persons by statute are valid: supreme, superior, ordinary, novice, and inferior. And only, hold on, let me see. You go down, son. All right, so it says that an inferior person or a Roman person is the form attributed to Western Roman trust or statutes of law or Roman body of law or associated courts, tribunals, and forums, right? It says inferior persons are the lowest standing and the weakest of all valid forms of persons. An inferior person can never be legitimately, reasonably, logically, legally, lawfully, or morally claimed or argue as superior to a superior person, right? Now, a superior person would be somebody holding a title, such as agent, officer, something like that. Now, An inferior person, such as a Roman person, is a person created by a legal spell curse system of the Roman court, known as the Vatican, also known as the Roman Catholic Church, for which they falsely claim ultimate ownership not only of persons, but associated flesh, mind, and soul. All right. Now we're gonna look. I'm gonna look this up real quick so I can tell you what it is. Now it says they use a process known as a legal spell curse system. So we're gonna look up what a legal spell curse system is real quick. I'm gonna tell you what this is. Hold up. Let me get this right. Oh my God. I have to make sure I say it the right way, y'all. All right, so here I go. Hold up. So, wait a minute. All right, so it's a system where they practice rituals of spells, right? All right, so let me show you, right? So this is what they've been doing, right? Check this out.
Look at me.
This looking good.
I'm out of here.
Where you going?
What do you mean where I'm going?
Where you going?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm going to the office. I gotta work out today at 3:30 instead of 5:30. So.
Okay. Taking her
To the office?
Oh, okay. Because all right. Well, let me finish this. Because I want to get this done. All right. So a curse, also called imperfection, malediction, execration, malicing, or any express wish that some form of adversity or misfortune will behave or attach to one or more persons, a place, or an object. In particular, curse may refer to such wish or pronouncement made effective by supernatural or spiritual power, such as God or gods, a spirit, or a natural force, or else as a kind of spell by magic, usually black magic or dark magic or witchcraft. In a later sense, a curse can also be a hex or a jinx, right? In many belief systems, the curse itself or accompanied ritual is considered to have some sort of force to the results, right? The reverse or element, a curse is sometimes called a removal or breaking, as the spell has to be dispelled and often requires elaborate ritual or prayer, right? So what these people were doing, right? They were taking like objects or items and they would do spells on them. And then they will put the item like near your house, or they'll somehow give it to you. You end up with the item, and what they expect is that the item put you under a spell to where the expected outcome from what the item is projecting will actually come out of you. You see what I'm saying? So we're gonna get back to it. I'm gonna tell you why I'm saying this, because these people are something else, right? So when you say a Roman person is also from, I'm gonna look this up real quick so you can understand what this is. A Roman person is a legal fiction created through the legal spell curse system. So I just told you what a legal spell curse system was. It's a system of rituals. It's a system of deception. It's a system where they take legal items or items and then they do rituals of them. And then they expect results to come out the items from the deception of what the item is. So a Roman person is a legal fiction created through a legal spell curse system, particularly associated with the Roman death code. This concept emerged in the late 1600s and is often used to corrupt the nature of law in reality, substituting physical individuals with fictional tokens and names under the control of various entities. The Roman person is considered inferior to other legal classifications such as judicatia persons and is often defined as an infant or ward in the term, indicating a lack of standing and authority compared to higher entities. Now, see, this is what they've been hiding from you, right? So you're under what's called a legal curse spell, where they using a legal fiction in order to get you to be under the spell to identify yourself as a legal fiction. And in that sense, right, you become enslaved, you become bound, right? Because you lose reality of what's really real or what's really true. And then you run around into this big frenzy that we got going on today. So an inferior person is by the very definition inferior to an official person. So anybody who's an official will stand over you as an inferior person because you stand as a legal person. And any official person will have the authority to control or dictate the outcome of a. That's why most of the situations you hold with these institutions, it seems like they have a better standing. It's because you're dealing with officials and you are unofficial. Okay? Now check this out. As inferior person can never be considered superior to a divine person. Therefore, no law based in inferior persons can ever be lawful considered to equal or higher than these canons. And every man and woman in higher order spirit is granted a divine person in accordance with the sacred covenant. The conditions of necessities when a man and a woman willingly choose to be associated with an inferior person, such as an inferior Roman person or a Roman slave, such demonstration of distortion of reality, lack of ability of reasoning and logic is grounds to declare such man and woman through their inferior person as incompetent. Okay, now I'm going to read that again for you because I really want you to see what I'm reading, right? As every man and woman of a higher order, right, spirit is granted a divine person. It's something in you that's divine. You know, if you got a divine person in you, why you not operating on the divine principles? There ain't no way you should be operating under less principles than you got a divine consciousness, right? So that's what it's talking about. Like every man and woman has a higher spirit is granted a divine person in accordance with the sacred covenant and the conditions of necessity. So whenever you need to really figure something out, you got an essence in you that comes to necessity of your need when you need it. So for you to not be dependent and utilizing what the divine essence of what you are to figure this out is ludicrous. It says when a man or a woman willingly chooses to be associated with an inferior person. So when you choose to be surety for a legal person or to put yourself up under some kind of name created by the state, right? This is what it's trying to tell you. When you choose to consider yourself, right, associated with an inferior person, such as an inferior Roman person or a Roman slave, such demonstration of distortion, because that's a demonstration of distortion, because you're operating under principles that are not natural in sense, in nature. That distortion of reality, that's a lack of the ability of reasoning, meaning you should be able to reason with yourself and see by basically reading the paperwork, looking at the way the name's spelled or whatever. You should have some kind of logic reasoning to be able to discern what this is saying. Okay? It is grounds to declare such man or woman through an inferior person as incompetent. So you're incompetent. If you can't seem to understand what's going on and read this paperwork and do what's need to be done and act in the right sense that you understand what's being said, then you're very incompetent. When a man or a woman through their inferior person, through your legal person, is lawfully declared incompetent, the society of one heaven or one nominated Eutychian society shall lawfully assume full power as guardian and executor or administrator for the inferior person. So when you show them that you don't know how to handle your own affairs, they act as executor and administrator over your affairs and charge you, make you pay bills, make you do all these things that they make you do. And that shows that you are in an inferior status, because if you were in a superior status, then you wouldn't be being charged. You get what I'm saying? So when you listen to what the brother's saying to you, man, listen, we got to read this stuff in order for us to understand how you going to deal with some of your, these things, these canons here were written so we can understand what's going on. So because they doing a lot of stuff they ain't supposed to be doing, right? They doing a lot of things that they ain't supposed to be doing. Now it says a supreme juristic person is an aggregate of 100 divine persons formed as a body of a spiritual trust. When the divine person shares similar characteristics and no longer owns the living flesh vessel. Let me go down some. Because I don't want to. Because it really started going in. It really started going in for real. Let me get down to. All right, so it goes into all these different types of persons that are created from different types of settings or situations that create these persons, right? Let me see. Give me a second, y'all. I gotta find this real quick. Oh man, it's been a minute since I just started getting into this. It's kind of but it goes into everything that we want to know about, right? So an account is a fictional form for an administration of currency transactions in trust or estate. Account can also refer to an actual statements produced summarizing monies received and paid with circulation of the balance. Neither an asset nor a liability is held validly unless it is recorded into the proper account of a trust or estate in accordance with these canons. It says income is the sums of all earnings received upon ownership. So income is what's received upon all earnings I received from ownership, right? So what it means is like you don't actually own the property until you pay it off lawfully. So like what I mean in order to pay a lease off lawfully, you will have to pay it with the rents that the lease is saying that you have to use. You can't use checks from your job. You can't use other forms of payment. You have to actually be able to use the value of the lease itself and somehow use that value to pay with. If you don't know how to do that, then you never actually buy the lease. You never pay it off because you never use the value that was actually issued for you to use. Until that value that's actually issued for the usage is actually used for what it's for, toward what it's for, and that lease is actually reduced until it's bought off, then everything can return to you. Everything, all the income and everything, all the income is all the interest that's incoming back into the note. So when you purchase the note is an extension of credit, and then the income, or what we call the proceeds, is what goes back into the note to reduce the note down to zero. But every time you put money back into the note, it reduces the principal balance, which is on the public side, back down, so it don't look like you still owe. So once you get the note all the way down to zero with the actual amounts that you're supposed to use, the note is fully, completely bought. Now you own the note because you lawfully paid for it. So now the holder of the note returns the note and all of its income, which is the income interest that you just put back into it, all comes back to you. Okay? This is proper banking. Okay? Check it out. Now, under inferior Roman law, a tenant of a possessory estate has the rights to gain in a fair income from the land and immovables from any leaseholder. This is called tax, right? Now, income gained from possession of property to which the person is not entitled is fraud and unlawful, unless a person holds a valid title to property issued by a valid government. Then any income received from the use of property is unlawful, right? So anybody receiving any income from property without a lawful right to it, it is unlawful. Now check this out. It says a liability is an obligation, debt, or responsibility owed by a person to another within the content of trust and estate law. A liability does not exist if no trust or estate exists. So in order for a liability to exist, there will have to be a trust or an estate involved. And these are actual laws. Now the obligation to a liability is defined by the relationship of the person to the trust or the estate and the rules of the agreement. A person cannot assume liability of another without having a relationship to the trust or estate that holds the liability. So it's saying that in order for you to become liable, you would have to be a party in relation to the estate, because in order for it to be the obligation, it would have to be an estate or trust, because all obligations are in trust or held in by states. So you might think you're the one holding the obligation, but really it's the trust, or it's the estate holding the obligation. And because you are a party who has an involvement or a right or a duty in reference to the record that you're using, you become bound just by your obligation of holding the records. Now, a holder of an original agreement generally accepts all liability of the trust or estate administered by that instrument, unless another related to the trust or estate consents to act as surety to the liability. So like if another person come and sign with you or something like that. But usually the original holder of the agreement accepts all liability of the trust or the estate administered by that instrument particularly. Okay, so it's very important that you understand the concepts of being a holder, right? as it is the obligation of the trustee on behalf of the executor of the trust to administer all assets and liabilities. Any acceptance of liability on the part of the beneficiary may only be temporary according to some fixed terms or conditions. Once the beneficiary completes any obligations or agreements associated with acceptance of surety for a liability, the obligation for any continuing liability must automatically return to the executor and administrators and their trustees of the trust or estate. When a person dishonors an instrument properly formed and registered, then the deed of dishonor may be issued. When a deed of dishonor properly formed is dishonored, a deed of protest may be issued. When the person who has dishonored three perfected instruments, they have then fully consented and accepted any accepted liability, even if such consent and acceptance had not been made orally or in writing. So basically, they have a legal obligation regardless if they try not to accept it. Once you give those, because people are like, well, what do I do? You do exactly what the law tells you to do. You give first that notice of dishonor. Second, you give some people give a notice of an attempt to cure, but it says notice of dishonor. Then you give a notice of protest. I'm protesting non-payment of your dishonor. Then after that, it's considered to be what it says, protest of dishonor, and then so once you register the deed, first when you issue the first payment to register, it says a properly registered deed. A properly registered deed is a deed that's properly registered and payable to a specific party as consideration. So when a deed is properly registered and payable to a specific person and is dishonored, when the dishonor is properly formed and the deed of protest may be issued, and then when the person who dishonored all three, the instrument, then they have fully consented and accepted any attached liability, even if such consent and acceptance has not been made orally or in writing. So when a person uses any property of a trust or estate without permission, they automatically assume a relationship with the trust or estate as beneficiary and accept full liability attached to the use of that property, right? Let me read it again. When a person uses any property of a trust or an estate without permission, they automatically assume a relationship with that trust or estate as beneficiary and accept full liability attached to the use of that property. So if you're using property of a trust or estate without proper permission to use it, and you're operating illegally, right? Then they consider you the beneficiary, the one responsible. As a person who admits mistakes and errors and trespass on the use of property of an estate or trust without express permission is automatically freed of any liability. Obligations, full liability returns to the executor or administrator of their trustees. Any executor or administrator of their trustees that refuse to act within their obligations and accept when an obligation is returned upon admission of a mistake or non-consent as surety is guilty of gross breach of duty and automatically becomes personally liable for any and all associated liabilities. So when you put them on notice that you're not accepting suretyship under the estate that you are executor, administrator. You see what I'm saying? They got to honor their duties. Any liability created in fraud automatically becomes a personal obligation to the person who committed the fraud. Now, currency is a formal system of money based on some standard unit of measure, a stored of value and a medium of payment and exchange. Money is anything that is generally accepted in exchange as payment for goods according to some estimate value, right? So currency is one system, and then money is another system. Okay? So you got currency and then you got money. While they function, the functions of money is to act as a medium of exchange. When money is formalized to be recognized as a store of value, a unit of account, and a method of payment according to certain rules, then it may be regarded then as currency. All currency, and therefore money, may be defined in two types according to the method of underwriting the value of money, commodity and property. Right? And then it goes into like negotiable instruments, explaining how they both tie in to the estate and the trust, right? But let me see. I'm gonna read one more thing from here. All right, so when I was talking about the spell system that they use, the ritual, when they take objects and they do spells and they do rituals under the objects and expect to put people under the spell and expecting people a certain outcome to come from it. So that was the whole custom of issuing birth certificates or birth records. When there was already living records already recorded, if we already got certificates of live birth, what was the purpose of a birth record? You see what I'm saying? And the certificate of living birth is the record. So when they came with the undermined 16th century person and created that record, the whole purpose of the birth record was to induce you and me into a curse, to where we assume the identity and the role of a person without really truly recognizing our true selves, not truly understanding what the person is and how to utilize the person or recognize our true existence from all the indoctrinations over periods and periods of years. Ever since you've been born, you've been indoctrinated with this lie, this custom of, so you can accept this personage, not understanding what's really going on and what it really is. All right, let me find one more thing pertaining to this, because it's a lot. Like I said, it's a lot in here. But let me get to this. All right, so conveyance. The creation of a valid form through conveyance is when a form is transported and transferred from one person to another by form of deed as registered in the valid registry of a government, right? Now, grant is synonymous with conveyance. In order to transfer a title, the instrument must contain adopt words of grant, which manifest the grantor's intent to make a present conveyance of the land by their deed, as distinguished from an intent to convey it all some future time. The absence of a valid words of conveyance within a deed voids the deed. The word grant, convey, assign, set over, transfer, and give are indicative of intent to presently past title. Let me read it again. The words grant, convey, assign, set over, transfer, and give are indicative, of the intent to presently pass the title. A conveyance is only valid when property registered in the Great Register. Therefore, all conveyance of property not properly registered is null and void from the beginning. If not under seal, it is not sufficient to pass legal title to real property. All right, so now we're going to read about fraud. So fraud is false representation of form to obtain unjust advantage or injure the rights of another. So somebody use a deceptive form of identification to identify you unjustly in order to gain an advantage over you by making you an inferior person to them in a superior status as an official, okay? Which is fraud. Fraud is deliberately an act of deception. His fraud is the deliberate concealment of an unknown truth in order to mislead or cheat. Thus, to deceive is to cause a man or a woman to believe what is false, to lead into error, and to delude. Fraud and justice can never dwell together. By no agreement or statute can it lawfully effect that a fraud shall be practiced. No right of action can have its origins in fraud. No action may arise out of a fraudulent consideration. A phrase, let him who wishes to be deceived. And those that defend it is the utmost perversion and fraud against the law. The greater fraud is not the fraud upon the people by the government and judiciary class within inferior Roman law societies, but the fact that an inferior Roman law first deceives all those who seek to practice law, thus entombing them within the prisons of lies. A concealed fault is equal to deceit, right? No action may arise out of fraudulent consideration, agreement, or contract. A great lie of Roman code system of law is that no member of the bar association may possibly know the law until they have reached the highest level of vetting, by which time their ideals, dreams, and sense of justice have been thoroughly extorcised from their minds, right? So it's talking bad about them. The actions against the wrong has no material influence upon conditions. A fraud remains a fraud, whether challenged, repealed, or temporarily forgotten. Forgery is the making of an limitation of some original form with deliberate intents to deceive. Therefore, a forger is a fabrication of false limitation forms. Forgery is deliberate act of deceit. Hence, forgery is the deliberate concealment of an unknown truth, order to mislead or cheat. Thus, to deceive is to cause a man or a woman to believe what is false, to lead into error and delude it. The age of a thing does not mitigate its defects if clearly a forgery. A foundation of lies does not make a kingdom of gods, but a den of vipers doomed to fall. It says any form that is reprobate and considered rejected, cast off, or worthless, immoral, demand and injury before the sight of the divine creator, right? So it's talking about like everything that they doing, that's fraudulent, trying to deceive people, trying to get people to surrender their rights over so that they can try to control you, to put themselves in a superior position. So you coming in calling yourself a judge. That's why the Constitution told you that no titles of nobility, all of that. That's why all of that is talking. It's why it talks about that, because those titles deal with inferiority and superiority complexes. It'll automatically put a person who don't understand in an inferior position just based off their limited understanding. All right, I'm gonna read one more thing. Find one more thing. Now check this out. It says the title is both a valid inscription or entry into the asset registry or register of a trust, and a certificate or notice of proof of such entry, and therefore claim of right of ownership. The word title is derived from the Latin word tilted. What is it? Titulus, meaning inscription, label, and notice of entry into a tabuli, with the Latin word tabula, whatever it is, literally meaning register. It was most commonly used in the context of register of slaves. The Latin word for register is tabula laris or whatever. The creation of title occurs upon a valid entry of a claimed property into the asset registry of the trust by recording of a minimum set of information about the property, now also defined as an asset. This minimum information includes a unique identification number, also called a unique registration number, the name for the property, and the date of entry into the register, and the grantor / provider of the asset, and the custodian of the asset, and the value of the asset. I think I'm gonna read this last little piece and then I'm gonna get up off here. But let me see which part I want to read. Because this it talks a lot about forms and concepts. All right, so it says an owner is a person who holds the right claim to a form or title to property. As a person is a fiction, it cannot own objects and concepts. Only other fictions in accordance with positive law. right? So an owner is somebody who holds rightful claim to a farm or title to property, right? But it says a person is a fiction and it cannot own an object or concepts. Natural law objects to concepts cannot own one another, only themselves. The divine creator, also known as unique collective awareness, is the only true owner of objects and concepts. Men and women may claim rights of use of objects and concepts by succession of the divine right being with the legitimate trustees and administrators on behalf of the divine as ultimate executors. When original form owing its existence to the rightful claim of ownership of the divine creator is lawfully conveyed into trust, this is called reality or real property, representing the highest right of use above all other claims of rights and titles. In accordance with the will of the divine creator, the sacred covenant, and the 7 sacred pronouncements, all objects, concepts, and all awareness are lawfully expressed into trust administered by the Society of One Heaven for the benefit of all men, women, higher order beings, animals, and life forms living and deceased now and forevermore in accordance with the canons, right? So, I mean, man, this thing, when I say, and I'm saying it's so much more to it. I ain't got a chance to even really get my feet wet in it yet. I've just been kind of like it's so much. It's so much to learn, so much like now watch this, man. I'm gonna show you why when I say this thing is so cold-blooded, listen to this, man. Listen to this. It says a holder implies acceptance of all associated obligations. A person has a right to qualify their consent by claiming to be only a holder in due course. A holder in due course is a holder that accepts their surety and consents for any obligation and performance due over the time an instrument is in their possession, but rejects any implied consent for surety for any potential misdeed or error by one or more previous holders. Now it says a person does not affirm their possession as a holder in due course is assumed to accept the full obligations, responsibilities, as well as any rights if the owner of the property. So basically saying you can't be a holder in due course without actually holding your obligation, meaning you stepping up to the plate.
I want food. No.
Well, y'all. Well, I think I'm gonna bring it. I'm gonna bring it to a closure. Yeah, I'm gonna bring it to the closure. But like I said, man, I'm gonna have to dig into it a little bit more because, like I said, it's a lot of great information in here. I mean, I ain't never read nothing that break it down like this. Like, let me read this. It says, under a lease, also known as tenancy, a tenant is obligated to pay the owner of the property some form of fee for its use or compensation. The most common term for the fee paid by the tenant for the use of the property is rents, while the most common term used for compensation from use is tax. A borrower, also known as a mortgager or a mortgagee, is a tenant with a bank or a financial institution as their landlord, and the rent being the interest component of their loan. And it goes into, it goes into a whole lot of other stuff. It goes into a lot of stuff. Goes into trust. All right, so it's talking about like a trust. Now it's saying that a trust, right, that is deficient in possessing one or more of standard characters of a trust can be regarded as a valid trust. The flesh person or persons that manages a trust, they are called trusters, executors, and trustees for the benefit of one or more beneficiaries. The role of the truster, executor, is equivalent to the functions of a director of a corporation, holding the legal title to the trust property, and by the original intent and design of all trusts effectively assume the formal power and rights of an owner of realty and property conveyed into the trust without being called the owner. An administrator is extremely appointed agent who assumes the same powers of an executor in the absence of a valid appointed executor or dispute or lack of clear bylaws. The trustee then owes a fiduciary duty to the beneficiaries who are the beneficiary owners of the trust property. See, it goes into a lot of different things, man. This is definitely a must read. You must study this thing, man, and get a full comprehension and understanding of what it's talking about. Now it talks a lot about divine persons and different things like that, but this is like the only thing that I've read that basically goes so deep into like like trust and all this stuff. Listen to this. It says a true trust is a form of a living trust containing divine property known as divine rights of use or divinity, that is validity, rested into the great register and public record of government society. A true trust may be for a single man or woman called a true person trust. A true location contains divine rights of possession of promised land and aggregate trusts such as universal trust. But yeah, y'all go check these canons out. Go check out the what is this? I think I showed it to you guys already before on the on a live I did before, where I actually pulled these canons up and I was reading over these same canons. I just never really went all the way down into it. But I'm gonna let y'all go ahead and look these up. These are the Supreme Canon Laws. Y'all go check these laws out and take your time, read through them, and study them, man. Because a lot of this stuff that I'm reading out of these things, I know I'm gonna have to study a lot of it and get a full understanding. But I do know that it is all based off the Vatican. But I don't know if these laws is from the Vatican. These laws is talking about the Vatican. It's talking about how the Vatican is trying to run everything and how they misleading the people in the world. So I don't even know who created these canon laws, but they say they came from heaven. So I'm gonna take it that's where they come from. So I'm gonna let you be the determiner of that when you read them for yourself, because from what I'm reading and from what I'm seeing as far as everything that's around us, this stuff right here is so accurate. It's more accurate than anything else that I've been reading. It gives you more insight. It talks more about rights. It talks about juristic persons. It talks about trust. It talks about, man, everything. For real. It talks about civilization, real estate. It talks about everything. It's like it didn't leave nothing. Now it's talking about the Sesta KV Trust. So that's the section that it's talking about the Sesta KV Trust Act, the bankruptcy. All right, now listen to this. Now it says the birth certificate. I'm reading Canon Law 2053. So this is Canon 2053.
Yes.
The birth certificate issued under Roman law represents a modern equivalent to a settlement certificate of the 17th century and signifies the holder as a puper, whatever that is, papar, and effectively a Roman slave. The birth certificate has no direct relationship to the private sacred trust controlled by the private banking network, nor can it be used to force the administration of the state or nation to divulge the existence of the sacred trust. That's crazy, man. These people, they basically tell you. So the birth certificate is what they say it is. It's effective a Roman slave or a British. A birth certificate has no relationship to the private sacred trust controlled by the private banking network. These are the positive canon laws. You want to look up the positive canon laws. This is talking about all positive laws. So basically, when you go and you read these canons, what you're going to see is a lot of the stuff that we get, the books that we read, like the Bible, the Holy Quran, and a lot of other books, it talks about all of that stuff in these canons. It talks about, basically like, this right here breaks it all the way down so you can see how people of higher knowledge that know these laws, understand these rules, understand these concepts and stuff like that. Yeah, they can run societies, most definitely, because they know the canons. They know the laws. They know the laws that's governing all of the transactions and everything that's going on. So that empowers them. And that's why, if you know why we got supreme judges, why we got all these different people in positions, when you go read these positive canon laws, it's going to open your eyes up. I promise you. If ain't nothing else, I don't care if you've been reading the UCC and it ain't been working, read these canons. Read these canons. I guarantee you, when you read these canons, you're going to be like, man, it talks about everything. It don't leave. It talks about the trust. It talks about the spirit, the man, the body, the flesh being the agent. It talks about everything. It don't leave nothing out. And then it goes into promissory notes. It goes into estates and trusts and everything. It talks about everything, man. So y'all go check that out. I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm gonna leave the rest on y'all. I did my part. This the second time I done came up here and brought this to the forefront. I did it before. Maybe some people may have missed it. Maybe they didn't really pay attention to what I was actually bringing. They was busy at the time. But I'm bringing it to you again. This is a double up. This is the second time I brought this forward. These are the
positive canon laws. Again, these are the positive canon laws. You need to Google that and you need to start reading these laws. It's a lot to read, but I guarantee you, if you read these laws, you're going to see everything that they've been hiding from you. You're going to be like, these dirty you're going to be able to see it. You're going to be like, oh, man, oh, man. All you got to do is read these canons. That's it, y'all. With that said, I leave you as I always do. In love, truth, peace, freedom, justice, and equality for us all. You guys have a blessed, have a wonderful day. And do yourself a great favor. Go check these canons out. Sit down with your daughter, your son, your family, and y'all read this together. I'm telling you, man, it's life-changing. It's going to change your whole perspective on everything you've been taught. Peace and love.